Good morning, everyone. When we talk about inequality, it is difficult to ignore schooling. Nevertheless, the schooling system has changed over the last few decades and access to schooling has been more generalized. I'm going to try to talk today about the link between the generalization of school and schooling inequalities. If we take a look at the developments of the education system in France since the 1950s, I will be able to demonstrate that the recent transformations seek to make indivisible some of the inequalities that are at play in the system. Inequalities can be seen through the gaps in results for tests. First of all, we must remember that the school system in France has known over the second half of the 20th century two explosions. The first took place from 56 to 68, and this involved the generalization of preschool, the creation of primary school with the same curriculum for all pupils, the end of the entry test at high school, and many other policies. The second explosion that we see on the graph on the next slide was generated by the 80% policy launched by Chevènement in 85. This led to a number of things: the creation of the professional baccalaureate, the increase of success rates, and the increase of numbers in higher education. So this explosion ended in 1992, after which time we saw a stagnation of the access rates for the baccalaureate. Since 2011, a series of new policies have been put into place: the 3-year baccalaureate, the removal of repeat years for students, and the increase of baccalaureate success rates, the encouragement of students to continue to higher education. All of this has lent to a new increase to access rates for the baccalaureate. In 2018, the objective set 23 years earlier was met. And this was due to the high increase of professional and technological baccalaureates. So we can see that there is now a third school explosion. Nevertheless, the future of students based on the latest diploma obtained is still very unequal, to the detriment of the children of parents who have unqualified jobs. So we can see that there are voluntarist policies that play on the events that build trajectories. So the rates of repeats for students and success rates for exams, but it's never based on the schooling conditions. Those conditions can produce and continue to produce failures. Voluntarist policies affect events that happen outside of the classroom, and these lead to make indivisible the scale of inequalities that are at play within classrooms. Based on these, I'm going to now talk about these inequalities on the next slide. I'm going to show you that I'm going to work on the data from the sample from 2007 that enables us for the first time to draw differences between the school performances for standardized tests at the end and at the beginning of high school. And this was done for a sample of 35 students. So we can see, first of all, that 16% of pupils do not reach year 12, do not reach year 10, 4 or 5 years after entering school at year 7. So in order to compare school performances, we need to separate these pupils in the next analysis. So we can see the raw data. So on this data, on this graph, we can see the maths results for national results. And this is based on the social background of pupils. We can see here that children who are from households whose parents are executives perform very well. And the gap here is 15 points. At the other side of the social spectrum, those children who come from inactive households get 50% in year 7 and just 25% in year 10. So the gap there is roughly 25 points. So these raw figures demonstrate that the effect of the social background increases throughout the pupil's school career. In an article published in La Population, Léona Moulin and myself questioned the robustness of these results. If you look at the adapted statistics models, we can ask the following questions. Between year 7 and year 10, school performances, are they converging, diverging, or are they remaining stable? Our analyses demonstrate, first and foremost, that the gaps, depending on the social background, increase in French and in maths, and both of these subjects are considered to be the detriment of the least fortunate. So in maths, children of unqualified parents lose more than 12 points compared to their counterparts. In French, they lose 6 points more, whereas they already demonstrated a 20-point gap at the beginning of high school. So we can see on the next slide that girls progress more than boys in both subjects. The gap is weaker as it relates to the social background, so it's roughly 2 or 3 points depending on the subject. Given that they already obtained better results in French in year 7, the gaps increase in this subject, but in maths, boys got better results in year 7, but girls progressed more. This is the only case where we can see a convergence of results or a type of a reduction of inequalities throughout high school. Between children whose parents are born in France and those whose parents are born in the Maghreb region or in Sub-Saharan Africa, we can see that the gaps increase. We also observe that the places where schooling is administered has an impact. Progression is not as good in priority education, but the effects are weaker or are lower in other schooling establishments. The size of the urban unit also plays a role. And this leads to the negative effects of the hierarchization of classes. So the more the region is urbanized and segregated and the distance between establishments enable them to compete with one another, then the more the schooling performances decrease. So we see that there is an evolution of performance that is negative in the Paris region, whereas the region does have the higher level of economic and capital resources. Since pupils do not have access to the same schooling establishments based on their migration, origin and their social background, we can ask ourselves whether the schooling conditions do not explain these observed effects. And if we look at what happened based on the effect of the country of birth of the parents, we can see that this effect is quite stark and disappears. In the next slide, we can see this because they are schooled in places where the developments are more negative compared to, and that's why children who come from North African and Sub-Saharan African backgrounds don't progress as much. We can also explain this between the gap between school requirements and the changes in family situations. So these policies have tried to reduce these effects. So it is logical to look at the persistence of inequalities based on social background. To conclude, and let's summarize the main points. So we can see that there's an increase in the access rate for the baccalaureate, but this is manifested in different types of baccalaureates. The second point, the indicators of the schooling career, so the repeat rates, etc., seem to make indivisible the success rates and school performances in high school. School performance gaps based on social background increase from year 7 to year 10. School performances based on the migratory origin of pupils also increase over the same period, but this can be explained by the schooling conditions of children who are from families with an immigration background. So this allows us to see that the generalization of school does not produce the reduction of social inequalities. On the contrary, the children of a generation have not been as numerous for following a normal school trajectory. The chances of learning for school students are unequal. School generalization do not produce the generalization of school performances. It is not without effect. We can see that there is a reading based on which the life of all individuals is perceived. As a result, the inequalities that we observe here don't have the same meaning or the same consequences as a few decades ago. Thank you very much for your attention.